it's hard for me to think of this as a job because I truly love what I do.
Welcome to the channel. I am here in Vermont with Will Adams, Honeybrook Tools, and we want to do a little Meet the Maker so you can learn more about Will Adams and how he started.
And Jamie is not taller than I am.
I am. I am though. So tell me how all of this started. Like when did you start woodworking first and then it turned into Honeybrook? Or?
Yeah, Honeybrook was an accident, really. So I started out as just a hobby woodworker. Okay. I made all of these boxes back awesome. There. I made the bench. Yep. I was just your typical weekend woodworker. I was teaching elementary school, and for reasons I'm not going to get into, I ended up leaving the profession just because it was ending up not being good for me. Okay. It was at a time in my life where I'd had a total knee replacement, had some complications, so I was going through a bunch of medical stuff, and between that and leaving teaching, I had to find something to do with myself. And I had kind of this vague idea that I could make things in my shop and bring in some cash, maybe boxes or what have you. But what really got it started was a couple months before I left teaching, I bought an old Delta belt-driven lathe. I'd said to Joanne, my wife, just in passing, I'd said, one tool I've never used is a wood lathe. Yeah. And she said, well, you should get one.
Go for it.
And that's all I needed.
Yeah, that's
so
awesome.
I found this old Delta on Marketplace, and I got it set up, and teaching myself how to turn was really my therapy, because I was kind of lost. I had been teaching for over 10 years. Now I had all this medical stuff going on, and I needed something to kind of get myself going. Yeah. And the turning, it did just turned
yeah.
Therapeutic for me.
That's awesome.
And so I didn't really know what I should make. One of the very first tools I made when I was just hobby woodworking is this bench knife. Yeah. And it's personal to me because I used a straight razor that was my great-grandfather's. Nice. And this piece of walnut is reclaimed from an old piece of family furniture that was beyond repair, but the walnut was great.
That's awesome.
So this is one of the first knives I made. And as I started turning, I'm like, well, okay, I'm turning spindles. What can I make with a spindle? And I'm like, well, maybe I can make a knife. So I found some knife blades online, and I started turning. And these are two of my first knives, and they're comically small.
They are, yeah.
But I was just getting started. I didn't really know what the proportions should be.
They're still beautiful, though. I mean, they're.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I keep them. I think it's important to remember where you started.
Yep.
I showed these to a couple woodworking friends online, and they really encouraged me. They said, you need to keep doing that. So one thing led to another, and the knives have evolved into this. I now have custom-made blades from Hawk Tools, and it started out with marking knives and these little scratch-alls. So these are the first two tools that I really started making and selling kind of casually. And the handle designs are my own. This is inspired by the shape of the kind of the classic turn screw. Oh, now you'll see that this has a flat on it. Yep. But the shape of that, I mean, if I wanted to make a turn screw like this, I could turn that and then just plane it down. But
I like that it's round better though.
Yeah.
Because it fits anywhere you put it.
That's the inspiration for it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Candidly, I don't know where I came up with this design for the marking knife. It just kind of happened. Yep. And I like it.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the first places I started selling was on a Facebook group called Can I Have It? They do weekend auctions and what have you. And I got wind that another maker was going to start posting marking knives to auction. And I said, well, I need to differentiate myself. So what can I do? I'll make winding sticks. This is actually one of the first sets I ever made. They've evolved since then. You know, winding sticks, there aren't a lot of people out there that make them.
Nope.
You know, you can find aluminum ones, but you don't find a lot of people that are making traditional wooden winding sticks. And they were surprisingly popular.
Yeah.
The style has now evolved. They're no longer rectangular. They've got a nice taper. They're a little bit thicker. They're always quarter sawn, so they're always dimensionally stable. And these, like I said, they proved to be very popular. And then from there, it just grew. And well, at some point, I finally realized, well, wait a minute, this is kind of a thing now. This is not just kind of a weekend thing. I need to start thinking about this. Yep. So I came up with the name Honeybrook Tools. Honeybrook Tools and Woodworks, because the Honeybrook is a branch of a river that runs. There's one branch that runs behind the barn, and there's another branch that runs on the other side of the property.
Oh, that's cool.
So it was just kind of
fitting.
It was kind of natural.
Yeah. Yep.
So I came up with that name. I designed my maker's mark. The maker's mark is inspired by kind of the classic stamp that you might see on a wooden hand plane.
Yep. That's awesome. It's like elegant, if that's word is. It's very, because it's on the blades too.
Yeah.
And the handle's already elegant, but having the stamp on there, and the stamp that does look like traditional, like it looks like it's a vintage thing, and that to me is very appealing. That was a good design choice.
That's kind of what my design is.
Yep.
You know, it's inspired by classic tools.
Yep. Well, yeah, especially like your marking gauges.
Yeah.
You started out with the more square marking gauge, and now you have the more oval marking gauge, which is after the Stanley
197.
Stanley 197.
And then
you have these ones now too.
Yeah.
Panel, which is based off the Stanley
85 and a half.
85. I don't remember the numbers, but yeah, absolutely.
And the form of the head has become more elegant.
Yeah.
But that's part of what I love about tool making too, is how am I going to do this? I got to figure this out.
Yep.
And you rarely get it right the first time. You know, when I first made this, you know, my pride got in my way, and I thought, oh well, that's fine. It can't be any better than that. And you know, I was trying to convince myself of something I didn't need to convince myself of. Once I looked at it, I said, yeah, no, the lines aren't right, you know. But that's fine, you know.
Well, see, and that, in my opinion, is what makes you one of the top end makers.
Well,
because you really could just say, all right, done.
Yeah.
Posted, sell, but you don't do that for every single tool, because I've known you a while, and I see the progression of the tool. Just say, oh, look what I made, and I refined it a little bit, so check this out. And I refined it again, check this out. But that's the whole point, is you take the time to figure out what's going to be comfortable, what's going to work the best, what's going to advance, you know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now look at this. This is a complete swing and a miss. So I know what I was trying to do.
Yeah. Yep.
And I almost got there.
Yeah.
But not quite.
Yeah.
It's the dimensions are wrong, the proportions are wrong. It's clunky. I mean, I can still go back to that at some
absolutely.
point.
Yep. Because this would be the first of the prototype series that you'd work on, and the cool thing too is because you're working with wood yourself.
Yeah.
You use a lot of these marking gauges on your own tools, so you can feel, is this comfortable?
Yeah.
Maybe I need to change this around, try it out. Is this comfortable? And that's the other benefit too, is you are a woodworker making woodworkers tools, because there are some companies that aren't woodworkers.
Right.
And they just make the tools, and it is what it is.
Exactly.
Yep. Absolutely.
But, yeah. So, but I also think it's important to keep these.
Yes.
Because it's a tangible reminder of something that I've tried that didn't quite work out, and more often than not, I am how shall I say it? I'm less secure in my work than I probably should be. And then sometimes I get maybe a little bit too comfortable. And then if I look at something like this, it's like, all right, Adams,
You humble yourself.
Adams, you need to calm down.
Yep. But then you also need to keep reminders like this around. Like I think, what kind of wood is this?
That's Macer birch.
Like this is just gorgeous. So you need to make sure you keep some of these around yourself, because I think you hit the nail on the head with these.
Right.
You know what I mean? So the reminder of what you've tried with the reminder of you have a great product here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Absolutely. And this one too is the burl.
Amboina burl.
Burl. So what's your favorite thing to make? If you had to pick one tool that you make, what's your favorite?
So when I'm making a batch of winding sticks, I say to myself, man, I could just do this. This is so much fun. And then when I'm making a batch of marking gauges, I'm like, oh my God, this is so much fun. I could just dedicate myself to marking gauges. And when I spend 8 hours standing at the lathe, I'm like, I love this. This is great. I could just do this. So I can't answer that because they're
your favorite while you're working on them.
Yeah. I love what I do. Yeah. And there are little parts of each tool that might be a little bit
tedious.
Yeah, a little bit tedious, a little bit fiddly that But overall, I love my job.
That's awesome.
And I don't even think of it as a job.
Yep.
You know, my shop here is in my barn.
Yep. It's your place.
It's a half a minute from my house.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to think of this as a job because I truly love what I do.
Yeah. When you list on your website, do you list them as batches, or how do you post stuff?
On my website, I say that everything is made to order, and that is mostly true for the winding sticks.
Okay.
The business model has kind of evolved. Originally, when things were a little bit slower, I was making everything really to order as they came in. I still do that to a large extent with the winding sticks, mostly because I have tried making these in batches, and what I have found is, even though it's really efficient, the downside is, believe it or not, they're kind of difficult to store. Because if you put them, what I've tried doing is, I'd wrap them in paper and then put them in a box, lined up, as well as I could. Inevitably, they get dinged up.
Yeah.
So it's not worth the risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I tend to make these pretty strictly to order, or if I do a batch, it's a small batch that I have on hand.
Yeah.
Things like this would be like a special offering.
Yeah.
Like right now, my website is filled with marking gauges. Mostly because there's a woodworking school over in Michigan where one of the instructors has made my marking gauge mandatory tool on his tool list.
That's awesome.
And he gave me a heads up. He's like, dude, you're gonna get
ready.
hit. So
get ready. That's awesome.
And plus, to go into this a little bit, I had hand surgery 2 days ago to deal with some arthritis in the thumb. I knew that this was coming up, and I didn't want my website to be completely just kind of like, I don't have anything.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So between knowing that this school was going to be placing a lot of orders and just needing to have something on hand. Yeah. And the marking gauges really lend themselves to batch making.
Yeah.
And you can learn about that in our other video.
That was perfect.
Yeah. Hey. And then it depends on the woods too. Like if I regularly offer ebony marking gauges, but I don't regularly have the ebony in the shop just because it's a pricier cash outlay to just have sitting in inventory.
Oh yeah.
But I can get it quickly.
Okay.
So you place an order for an ebony marking knife, and I'm like, okay, I either have it in stock and I turn it and we're done, or I go to my supplier, I get it, and it really doesn't affect the lead time so much, because like if you order something from me today, unless it is like literally in stock, you're not going to get it next week.
Yeah.
it goes into my kind of workflow.
Cute. Yeah.
So, and people, I have found are really patient with that. You know, they know that I'm not. I mean, this is a one-man shop.
Yeah.
Literally. I don't have any CNC machines for doing duplicative turning. I've got nothing against it.
No.
Some people do it.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
It's just not my jam.
Yeah, and I think that's why people are okay waiting, because they understand that each one of these is hand turned.
Right.
Each one of these is hand planed. If you guys follow my channel, you know that most of my tools come from makers, and a lot of those tools come from Will Adams and Charlie Ernest and all these people that make custom tools, because I like that. I like that it was handmade. So if I need to wait a while, I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
Because it's more special to me too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So.
So I gotta ask. I don't know if you'll answer.
Okay.
We can cut it out if you're not going to answer. Is there anything else in the pipeline? Because I know you come out with new tools and stuff like that. Is there something else you're thinking about making that we can get a little insider information about?
Yeah. Ow, that was my head.
I wish that was in camera. He just hit his head on a post drill.
Well, also, in fairness to me, I mean, I did have surgery 2 days ago.
We'll give him a pass.
I'm a little bit.
Ooh, wow.
I'm a little bit funky.
I didn't see this one.
So this is a prototype of a panel gauge that I would like to start making. And again, so the prototyping process is just so important. You know, you can't just knock something out and then produce it.
Nope. Make it, test it. Ah.
You know, this has got some play in it. I need to rethink the design so that I can put like a brass shoe inside, so that it doesn't completely ding up the brass.
That's beautiful though.
And then I want to find I need to find somebody to make cutters for me. So one thing that's going to be different.
Ask the community.
Hey, y'all, if you can make cutters, I'm your
Give
guy.
him a call. Yep. I'm sure you get a lot of sense of accomplishment, because you go through all these different prototypes and testing it and trying out all these things. Then when you finally get it and you can make it over and over again, don't you just feel like a sense of, this is awesome?
So,
you know?
So here's the prototype process.
Okay.
So this is the first one that I made. And I think the wood is swelled, so yeah, that won't move.
You want me to
so here's what I did. I had made this, and I was so proud. I'm like, I got the brass in here. Yeah. I got the screws clocked. The brass is nice and polished, and then I go to put in the beam. I'm like, dude, that beam is comically small. And you know, one of the things that I do when I'm making, I get figures in my head.
Yep.
And when they're the right figures, that's awesome. Yeah. If it's the wrong figure, not so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know how I got the wrong dimension in my head, but I cut the hole in the beam too small.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I see.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there was a time in my life where discovering an error like this would have thrown me into a rage, and I would have thrown this across the shop. And I just laughed at myself.
I've been there.
I just laughed at myself. I said, Adams, you come on. Yeah. What? Anyway, so that's in the pipeline. I would like to start offering those.
That's really cool.
I'm also making some specialty knives and punches for chair makers. Pin knives and punches. I made one batch that are going down to Shea Alexander Brothers in Virginia.
Yep.
Check them out.
I've mentioned them a lot.
They are great people.
Yep.
So I made a batch for them for one of their chair making classes, and once I'm back to making, that's going to be one of my first things out of the gate, is to get those going, because when I posted them on social media, all of a sudden I had chair makers following me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because there's not a lot of people making that stuff anymore. You know, so if you start getting into more of the specialty.
Yeah, from what I understand, there was one guy that was making the pin knives, and now he's not making them anymore. Okay. So I'm like, all right, I'll do it.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely. So I did notice that you've worked with a lot of like Australian lumber that I haven't seen before. So how do you make the wood choices that you do and the different materials that you have?
Okay, so the Australian thing came to me from one of my Instagram followers who happens to live in Australia. Yeah.
Colin Lyle. I've mentioned
Colin
him
Lyle.
before.
He
Yep.
lives in Australia, and he was admiring my work, and he was selling timbers and trying to expand into the American market. So he sent me some to try out, and I initially thought, man, this is going to be expensive getting it from Australia, blah 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 blah. But once I got it and I started doing the numbers, it really wasn't that bad.
Good.
And the wood is absolutely gorgeous.
It is.
I've actually had some criticism on social media from people that have said, there's better use for that. One guy just recently said something about, I posted some tiger maple winding sticks that I was making commission set, like nice. 24 inches.
Oh, nice.
He was really, he was dismissive. He said, there's a better use for that wood, that should be used as musical timber, it should be this, it should be that. And I'm like, well, as a musician and a guy who previously restored violins, I appreciate the need for high quality tone wood.
Yeah.
That said, one of my kind of driving thoughts in making is your tools should inspire you. When I pick up this plane, this H&T Gordon, it feels good in my hand and it's beautiful. And it might sound corny, but I think if you're surrounded by beautiful things, you're going to be inspired to make beautiful things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Does anybody need tiger maple winding sticks? Well, no, probably not. You probably don't need them.
Yeah.
But,
they're beautiful though.
If you're a hobby woodworker and you only have, between work and family obligations, you've got 2 hours on the weekend to do your projects. I didn't think that these were going to be as popular as they are. These winding sticks are probably my biggest seller.
That's awesome.
And I think it's probably because, the hobby woodworkers who have 2 hours a week, they don't necessarily want to spend their time making their tools.
Yep. That's me. I'd rather buy these and have them be beautiful and
they want to make their project.
Yep. It's a joy to use. And that's what I find with because again, I have a lot of maker-made items from friends, from other companies, from stuff and they're beautiful to look at, they're beautiful to use, and I just smile when I grab them and I go to use them,
Yeah.
And that's something way different than just grabbing the aluminum ones because I'm a woodworker. I'm very tactile too, and visually these are appealing and they feel appealing and just I'm inspired by that kind of stuff. Like you said, be surrounded by beautiful tools, you make beautiful things because they are, and they're just fun to use, So we know as a woodworker, there are going to be days where things just go wrong. You try something and it goes wrong. You try something and it goes wrong. How do you get yourself through that time to get the motivation to dive back into it and not beat yourself up?
Well, there's a couple ways to answer that. As a woodworker, before I started making tools, I really learned patience and acceptance with myself, and I'm brutally hard on myself. But I've learned through woodworking how to let that go. And I got to go back to the start of the business. When I left teaching, it was completely unexpected. And my wife and I, at that time, we were on like a 2-year plan where we were both going to retire. But I could not have done this without Joanne. She has stood by me throughout everything because I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know that I was going to end up having an additional 3 knee surgeries. So she is constantly supporting me, and she constantly tells me, Will, if you build it, somebody will buy it. Yeah. She has a lot of faith in me. We balance each other out. She reins in my grandiose plan. Oh, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
No.
Yep.
And now since she has retired from teaching, she has really she's become my partner. She has helped out with the books. It's going to be, because she's got a much more kind of analytical brain. Yeah. She's much more
regimented.
She likes order, and that's going to be really helpful to me. She went with me to Handworks last year.
That's right.
And that was an absolute joy, because I worried that she might feel kind of left out. because it's, you know, it's not her wheelhouse.
That is true, yeah.
But I smiled just thinking about it. As I was standing there, you know, talking to a customer, I would hear her talking to somebody else and saying,
awesome.
"Oh, that's ring digi."
That's awesome. Yes.
Yeah. So she got it all
She picked
down.
it up? Yeah.
And she was packaging all the tools.
That's awesome.
And so now, and again, since she's retired,
You can do that together.
yeah, and
That is
somebody
awesome.
just mentioned to me a couple days ago about a show down in the Albany area in September. So I think we're going to go to that, and because it's September in New England, and you know it's a beautiful time to travel.
Yep.
And I mentioned it to her, and she, you know, kind of lit up. She's like, "Oh, that'll be fun."
Yeah, that's
So
awesome.
when I walk out that door, all is good. Can walk into Murphy and Joanne and Murphy,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and just set into our routine.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank the Academy for nominating me for this award. This is a lifelong dream of mine. I couldn't have done this without you. Mom, thank you. Dad, you didn't understand me, but thank you.
That's hilarious. Okay. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, any comments, anything like that, feel free to let us know down below. If it's questions for Will, I'll make sure that he gets them so he can respond to you. Thank you for inviting me over to your shop.
Hey,
I will come raid the shop again. Just
it's
so
been great to have you.
Yes. Thank you guys. Have a good day. That's awesome.
I thought you were going to cut that out.
Huh? Heck no.